The Murder of Jill Dando, review a powerful re-examination but still a distinct lack of answers. 20 years on, the murder of BBC television presenter Jill Dando still seems senseless and incongruent. She was the friendly face who fronted programs from Holiday to Crime Watch to the Antiques Inspectors. What on earth could the murder of Jill Dando? BBC One wasn't able to provide an answer to that. In fact, perhaps it was simply that the trail has gone too cold to produce anything more than the theories that have long swirled around the murder, although each of these in Netflix's hands might have been an episode in itself. In truth, the trail was already pretty cold by the time the police had their first viable suspect, a full year on from the bloody scene on Dando's doorstep. The documentary, Gallery Crimes of the Century, the murder cases that no one could solve, mirror pics. Barry George, who appeared only in archive footage, was that man, whom the police needed to trace, interview and eliminate from their inquiries. It had been a year of pressure from above, increasing scrutiny from the press, and those proliferating theories, the most prominent of which were a gangland hit connected to Dando's work on Crime Watch and a revenge killing by a Serbian hitman linked either to Dando's TV appeal on behalf of Kosovan refugees or the NATO bomb that had targeted Serbia's TV station. There was not one, there were images of the search of George's flat, shocking in-house quality. It was and footage of him in a police interview. George was found guilty by a jury in 2001, though the evidence against him was almost wholly circumstantial. In 2007, an appeal court quashed his conviction on the basis that too much weight had been placed on the one thing with which the prosecution had tried to link him to the scene, a single particle of gunpowder residue less than 1/1000th of an inch in size, that matched the residue on Dando's hair. The documentary there was also an interview with the then director of BBC News, now Director General, Tony Hall, who described the calls the BBC received shortly afterwards, explicitly mentioning a Serbian connection and naming him as next on the list. He seemed determined the BBC would not confirm whether Cliff Richard had been approached to appear. He was often described, given that the film had to serve as both tribute and re-examination of the crime, it was lucid and powerful. But there remained an
raindrop, drop top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.